Penguin Random House Audio presents Under the Sky We Make: How to Be Human in a Warming World. This is the author, Kimberly Nicholas, Ph.D. To 2030. I hope we did right by you. Introduction. Science won't save us. In the half-lifetime since we met in college, I've had many adventures with my friend Colty. Together, we've seen the sunrise through towering pines after dancing all night on the shores of Fallen Leaf Lake, buoyed each other through heartbreak and celebrated when we both found true love, sobbed through a funeral where our tears loosened the glue of the fake mustaches we wore to honor our dead friend's iconoclastic spirit. Colty and I have always been able to talk about anything and everything, but I was surprised by the conversation we had a few years ago when I called to congratulate him on the birth of his second child. I was expecting to hear intimate stories of adjusting to new family routines, but his daughter's arrival had raised Colty's sights much higher. "Kimmy, I want to talk about climate change," he said. "I feel like all these red flags are going up around me saying, 'Wake up.' But I'm overwhelmed. Where do I start?" For decades, I've spent my professional life researching, teaching, and communicating about climate change. But until recently, my climate work hasn't been something I talked about with my closest friends. For my research, I spent long, sweaty days of fieldwork in the mountains and grasslands and vineyards of California, documenting sagebrush marching uphill and Pinot Noir grapes around my hometown of Sonoma, losing their color as the world warmed around them. All this felt like a separate world from the time I spent with my friends, where we talked and joked about our families, careers, and love lives, went for hikes through the redwoods and to the beach, and shared good meals and wine. Through my years of avoiding talking about the climate elephant in the room, I was like most Americans who know climate change is happening and are worried about it. Only 10% don't believe the unequivocal fact that humans are warming the climate. But still, unlike the vocal climate dismissives, most of the climate-concerned majority stays silent, reporting they almost never talk about climate change with friends and family. Many feel like it's someone else's problem. Polar bears, perhaps, or politicians, or people unlucky enough to be born somewhere poorer or sometime later than they were. Once you do start talking about it, you can't avoid scientific truths with overwhelming existential implications. Human climate pollution and destruction of nature are putting at risk both human civilization and life on Earth as we know it. Gulp. In the face of this enormity, no wonder so many feel helpless, that you're powerless and don't matter, and hopeless, that no one can help and therefore nothing matters. I understand those feelings. I have them myself. Over the course of my career, climate change has transmogrified from something only experts could see, reading clues trapped in icy air bubbles or statistical patterns in long-term data sets, to something everyone on Earth is living through. For me, climate change has gone from being something I study to a way that I see the world and experience my life. It's one thing to publish a study on the hypothetical impacts of temperature increase on California's people and ecosystems. It's another to feel my stomach gripped by fear as my parents flee a catastrophic California wildfire, cranked up by longer, hotter, drier summers. It's one thing to measure declining color pigments in Pinot Noir grapes due to increasing temperatures. It's another to viscerally mourn the loss of the taste of my favorite wine as it passes from this earth. By the time Colty and I finally talked about climate, it had gone from a measurable change to a prevailing crisis to a screaming emergency. Climate change was already rewriting the stories we read, reshaping our everyday lives, affecting everything and everyone we love. Climate was already woven through everything else we talked and cared about. Colty and I had a series of climate counseling sessions where we talked about the core values he hoped to pass on to his kids, his hopes and fears for the future, what inspired him and kept him going. In our conversations, I translated the science of an enormous global problem to a personal and human scale. I wanted to help my friend see the power he already had to be a force for climate and social good, and to live a better life, more in line with his values, along the way. These sessions were a version of the conversation I've been having over and over again for years, with strangers at parties and on trains, in my talks with business leaders, festival goers, protesters, knitting grandmas, and everyone else who will listen. From these conversations, I know firsthand that there are many smart, concerned people out there who are deeply invested in the future of humankind and who don't need further proof that climate change is a real and urgent threat. Those of us who want to help are the majority. If even a fraction of us can mobilize and take action, we are more than enough to stabilize the climate. That's why I'm writing this book. Science won't save us. Here's some good news for everyone who's been avoiding science since you had to memorize the periodic table in high school. We don't really need more science to solve the climate crisis. Saving the planet for humanity and the rest of nature is no longer a matter of understanding anything we don't or developing a ton of technology we haven't. Science has carried our collective knowledge about as far as it can in the time we have. Luckily, it's enough. The science of climate change is firmly settled and has been for a very long time. It boils down to just 5 key facts, which I've been teaching since 2011. It's warming, it's us, we're sure, it's bad, but we can fix it. Humans have the capacity to stop dangerously destabilizing the climate. Basically, the climate problem has been solved on paper many times over by now. We know what we have to do and how to do it. Further tech breakthroughs could make it even faster and cheaper, but essentially we have the tech we need in hand. Okay, then fixing climate change is a political problem, right? Well, yes and no. Changes in goals, policies, and laws are crucial. And you need to understand some power politics to get why humans find ourselves threatening to unplug our own life support system in the first place. But the basic political framework to solve the climate crisis is also in place. To paraphrase 3 decades of negotiation speak, the world has agreed that stopping climate warming is in the shared interest of humanity. The 2015 Paris Agreement says each and every country, and therefore each and every industry and city, and ultimately each person, must do their fair share to stop climate heating before it exceeds intolerable limits. That bounces the ball right back to us. So yes, we need technical and social transformations informed by science to be put into practice to solve the climate crisis. We need political processes to do this fairly, citizens informed by fact-based climate education at all levels, and media coverage that explains how climate shapes nearly every story, preferably all at once. But what will really make or break the climate globally and forever is what ordinary people do in the next decade. The climate hinges on what people vote for, with our ballots and time and money and careers, with our leisure and travel and consumption and production, with our relationships and conversations and aspirations and memes and everything else that adds up to culture. Science or experts or technology isn't enough to save us from climate catastrophe. We as humanity, a groundswell of people alive today around the world, have to save ourselves through what we think and feel and ultimately what we do. This means we need people with the courage and compassion and imagination to transform themselves and society in the ways that science tells us are necessary to maintain conditions for life on Earth to be able to thrive. Each of us can become that sort of person. More and more are every day. The climate especially hangs on what Americans do in the next decade. In 2010, I moved from California to Sweden, where I'm a professor of sustainability science at Lund University. Looking at the United States from abroad, it's acutely clear how much the climate hinges on what happens in the world's largest economy and largest historical climate polluter. USA, we're number 1. For practical reasons, Americans starting to take climate responsibility at scale would be an enormously powerful accelerator of climate action worldwide. But there's a deeper cultural element too.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?